Welcome back to the Power of Coffee. Last time on the 100th page, we learned two things. One, that Betty was dead. Two, the Lumley, her daughter, who was working as a nurse in Canada, had also died. So Martha went to see Madeleine Boyson, who happens to be Betty and Lumley's friend, okay? More of Lumley's friend. And she told her that Lumley had died. So now, where we are now, Madeleine Boyson is trying to contact the hospital in Canada where Lumley used to work. So that's where we are now. So let's carry on with the story, The Power of Coffee. So now Madeleine is calling the hospital. So let's continue. Hello, I'm Madeleine Boyson. I'm Lumley's friend, she said, and before she uttered another word, the woman replied, All right, it's good you called. We need you to come for her. Once again, Madeleine went mute for some moments. Her eyes were already full, and she occasionally dried them up with her blouse. Her eyes were already full, and she occasionally dried them up with her blouse. Now she was away from the phone. As she sucked up the water through her nostrils. Hello? Ruby called when she seemed to be gone for too long. Hello, I'm here, sorry. Madeleine promptly replied. All right. What happened to her? How did she die? Madeleine interrupted. Well, we don't really know what happened. She was all right when she came to work. But some time later, she complained of dizziness, and then she collapsed. And that was it, Ruby casually said. Well, I don't believe you. I don't believe a word of what you just said. I'm an attorney, and I'm going to find out what really happened to her, Madeleine said, sober. Consequently, Ruby apologized for her loss, sounding genuine. Consequently, Ruby apologized for her loss, sounding genuine. I'm sorry. It's shocking, but that's the truth, she said, and stayed on for about a minute before ending the call. Madeleine was seated on the bed now, sobbing more profusely. When I got home from Madeleine's place, I felt less pressure on the mind. One burden was off my chest. Lumley's demise was now known. But how was I going to rebuild Betty's own? Her burial was going to take place in 6 days' time. The ceremony was going to occur at the premises of her church, which was well known, though far from the neighborhood. Some of the church members were co-sponsoring the event with her 3 friends, who were her only family beside her late daughter. If I didn't talk, someone else would, and my parents were going to find out. I decided to first choose an appropriate time. It had to be when everyone was happy, relaxed, maybe watching a movie on TV, or while we were all chatting over lunch. However, we rarely ate together at a table. Dad usually took his meals in his room, and Mother had hers at the kitchen, alone. I needed to get everyone together. When I got home that day, Mother had just woken up from a satisfying sleep. So now you know we are talking about Martha. We are reading in Martha's voice now. As she told me herself. So, when I just got home, Mother had just woken up from a satisfying sleep. As she told me herself. She commended me for getting back early. But it wasn't at noon. It was around 1:30 p.m. She asked me to take my lunch and rest, and then later help her with cooking. I obeyed, and after the meal, took a nap to make up for the early rise. It was now 4 p.m. and Mother was already at the kitchen cooking. I apologized for coming in late. I apologized for coming in late to help her, but she said she had just begun. I thought this was the right time to tell her. Consequently, I began. "Mother, I heard something about Betty," I said in a composed tone. She stopped and looked at me. "What about her?" she said, looking as though she suspected something bad. I quietly inhaled and then exhaled. "She was sick, and then she got a heart attack," I said. Mom was still staring at me. She appeared to be analyzing what I just said. After some moments, she took in a deep breath and then stared through the windows before her. She did not say a word, since she understood what had happened. Later, Father learned of it, and he was distraught. He began to ask questions. When it happened, when I got to know of it, why it happened, and then when the funeral was coming on. We attended the burial service, which fell on a Sunday, but my parents left early, after about an hour. Father was not a fan of such occasions, and neither was Mother. The reason was that they cast a toll on your health. First, you had to travel a long distance to get to the funeral grounds, and that was stressful. Then you had to sit through the year-long ceremony, causing you more stress. On the other hand, I stayed behind up until the service was over. It ended in the evening around 5:30 p.m. I hurried to catch a bus home. I joined an extensively long queue for the bus that would take me straight home. And waited for hours. By 9 o'clock, I was home and feeling depressed. Mother scolded me for arriving late and staying up until the ceremony was over. I didn't defend myself, though I wanted to say that I had to stay back for Betty's sake, because she was just like a mother to me. She was just like another mother to me. Now I could breathe, since it was all over. I felt too exhausted to take a shower, but I had to release the stress and heat. I pounced on a meal right afterward, and then sunk into sleep. Okay, so this narration, this part is telling you about Martha and how she was at the funeral of Betty and how she stayed back so late and got home at 9 p.m. So the story continues. It was a quiet evening for Madeleine on the day she spoke with Ruby Miles of the St. James Specialist Hospital, the hospital that employed her belated friend, Lumley. After minutes of sobbing, she fell asleep on the floor and remained there until morning, only getting up to use the washroom and then returning to the floor once again. She lived alone without any family, but for a live-in personal assistant and young woman who organized her daily meetings with clients. In addition to her was another woman who did the cooking, the laundry, and cleaning of the house. After Martha had left, she called up Audrey, her 25-year-old assistant, and asked her to cancel her appointment for the rest of the week, stating that she was unwell. So now we're talking about Madeleine and what happened to her after she had learned of Lumley's demise from the hospital after speaking with Ruby Miles. Okay. Audrey, like Martha, was a university graduate who had been with Madeleine for close to 2 years. She too had been struggling for a job, and this was her first corporate position. The two met at a restaurant which Madeleine frequented for her lunch and sometimes dinner when she wanted a break from home-cooked meals. Audrey worked there as a waitress and came upon Madeleine one afternoon because she was the only waiter around. Audrey worked there as a waitress and came upon Madeleine one afternoon because she was the only waiter around. She greeted her warmly with a broad smile and then asked for her order, which she presented in no time. Madeline left her with a nice tip, an amount totaling about $3, but she showed great appreciation for it, continuously thanking her. Over time, she became her personal waitress, getting to know when she would be coming over to eat and what she would like to take. She had her phone number, and they often chatted informally. That's how she got to share her educational background and the frustrations of getting a job befitting of a degree holder. However, before Audrey's arrival, her receptionist was the one who organized her meetings. Her name was Julie, and she had been with her for nearly all the 10 years of her solo practice as a lawyer. Okay? Before Audrey's arrival was Julie. Her name was Julie, and she had been with her for nearly all the 10 years of her solo practice as a lawyer. She started working with Madeline when she was 27, and now she was nearing her 37th birthday. Audrey was like a sister to her, and just like any responsible sibling will do, she tried to find out what was wrong with her. She was in the room that night when Madeline slept on the floor. She sneaked in when she couldn't find her anywhere else, and then stood at the doorway, surprised to see her lying there. After some moments, she tiptoed and got a sheet from the bed and covered her up with, and then left. By morning, she was back in the room and waiting for her to wake up. She stood for some time, and when she got tired, she sat on the floor beside her feet. Madeline awoke around 9 a.m. She yawned and then opened her eyes. But she didn't see Audrey until she sat up and glanced about, probably sensing a presence. When their eyes met, Audrey smiled, and she responded with a dry one. Then she got up and sat beside her. Properly and asked how she was. Madeline gently smiled, seeming to appreciate her concern, but she didn't say anything. Audrey left her after some minutes to bring breakfast, and Madeline strolled to the bathroom to freshen up. She took a shower, which did her good, because once she was out, she became lively. She got to the kitchen to eat and then began a conversation with Audrey. She thanked her for covering her up the previous night, saying that she felt the warmth. Subsequently, she wanted to verify if her meetings were indeed cancelled. Audrey confirmed it, and then Madeline broke the news to her. Her best friend had died, and she was going to get her body home from Canada. She would be leaving within the week, but didn't know when she would be coming back. Audrey was quiet and seemed a little taken aback by the news of her impending travel. Madeline glanced at her when she didn't talk for about 3 minutes, and then smiled and asked if she wanted to go with her. That brought her back. She smiled and then said, "I don't think it will be appropriate, but if you need me, sure." "Thank you," Madeline remarked, sounding appreciative. But Audrey stayed behind, and she left. After three days, but Audrey stayed behind, and she left after 3 days. Okay, so as you could hear, Madeline is now going to Canada to get back Lamley's body. Audrey is a living assistant whom she met some time ago as she worked as a waitress. Let's continue the story. Okay, but Audrey stayed behind and she left after 3 days. However, before she did, she contacted a friend overseas who was also a lawyer. His name was Peter Brooks, an African American whose legal practice took him across the United States and Canada. Madeline first met Peter in the UK, where she had gone to study law after earning a bachelor's degree from the university back home. However, he wasn't a student, but a visiting lecturer. He taught her for about 2 years before returning to the States. She found in him a mentor and then a friend, whom she could count on for legal assistance when the need arose. Okay. Consequently, they kept in touch. Peter received his law degree from the US and later got a permit to extend his practice to Canada after passing some exams. Subsequently, he had been going back and forth the two countries, and currently he was in Canada, working on the case with his team. Madeleine touched down after a long flight, spending more than 7 hours airborne. She checked into the private residence she had pre-booked on Booking.com, a popular worldwide accommodation platform. It was a 2-bedroom house in a quiet area of the city where the St. James Specialist Hospital was located. It was homely, with modest decor, but had everything she needed for a comfortable stay: running water, electricity, a working internet, and a peaceful atmosphere. She had rented it for a month, but that could be extended, according to the property manager, a 37-year-old man who lived nearby in the neighborhood. According to his profile on the accommodation site, he was a consultant by profession and had been a registered member of the site for 7 years. There were over 100 reviews for the apartment. The majority of them coming from travelers outside Canada. Madeleine was drawn to it, primarily for its location and monthly cost. However, she chose to go with Rob's house because she found him online at the time of the search and decided to give him a call. It was quite early in his time zone. Okay, so now Madeleine has arrived in Canada and she's checking into her apartment. Okay, the apartment that is managed by a man named Rob. Okay. It was quite early in the morning. It was quite early in his time zone, but he answered almost promptly. She greeted him and apologized for calling so early in the day, but he said it was all right since he was an early riser. Rob Stowen was his full name, and he spoke with an American accent. Madeleine wanted to know what kind of person he was, if he was sane enough to be around. Though they weren't going to share the place. She introduced herself after the salutation, stating that she was a lawyer who was coming to town for a case and needed a place to stay for at least 3 months. Rob replied in a lively tone, saying that it was hers to take. Then she asked him about his job as a consultant and the kind of consultancy services he offered. He claimed he worked in various fields: real estate, business development, and general investment. He cited some clients of his and told Madeleine he could provide concrete evidence to support it. Madeleine asked about his hobbies, and he chuckled and replied that it was just the ordinary: watching TV shows, taking ice cream, reading a nice book once in a while, and escaping somewhere to relax. She must have spent about 10 minutes chatting with him before clicking the button to book the place. She was smiling long after the call was over, and Audrey noticed this and commented that she seemed to be in a good mood. She responded that she was, since she just found the ideal place to stay while in Canada. After disembarking the flight, Madeleine took a taxi from the airport to the apartment. It was an hour's trip, and Rob met her at the door because she had called him from the airport that she was on her way. After she had booked the place and made payment later on in the day, he stocked up on the groceries and toiletries, getting food items such as chicken and vegetables, as well as some toilet rolls, soap, hair, shampoo, and toothpaste. Subsequently, he checked out his reading materials. There were a few magazines, albeit old, published about 5 years ago. He thought of getting something fresh and interesting for his guests, and subsequently he did. There was a bookstore nearby that sold a range of family-themed magazines, and he got 3 of them. The house was already spruced up, thanks to the cleaner he had hired for that. So he filled the fridge with some soft drinks and bottled water, and then placed the grilled chicken into the freezer. Subsequently, he laid the magazines on the table in the room. She was going to sleep in, and then waited at the door when she was about 10 minutes away. Rob was 5 feet and 6 inches tall, and wore a casual t-shirt and some blue jeans trousers. But he had a coat all over that because it was quite cold, although it was past midday, about 1:30 p.m. The taxi pulled up soon enough for him to get back inside. And with his guest, who was quite happy to see him.